Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Concepts of a Pod. Before we get started, we did want to acknowledge that a lot has happened this week, but this episode was recorded last week. So since taping, we have seen that the National Guard has been continuously deployed in DC, and ICE has ramped up their arrests, including a delivery driver in DC, which footage of has gone viral on the internet, so maybe you've seen that. We can currently assume that DC is a test case for the rest of the country, and that the Trump administration is trying to see how much they can get away with before potentially trying to do this to other American cities. And then in Texas this week, the legislature went as far as to lock a Democratic lawmaker in the building overnight because she wouldn't sign a permission slip to leave. And then globally, the crisis between Ukraine and Russia continues with Trump and Putin's meeting earlier this week in Alaska. So while today's conversation was taped earlier, we will keep coming back to what happens next and how we can respond together. All of that being said, enjoy this week's episode with a very special guest, Organizer Memes. We are joined by a very special guest, Organizer Memes. Memes, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell the folks in our audience a little bit more about you.
Hey, what the fuck is up? I'm one part of the collective that is Organizer Memes. What can we say about Organizer Memes that hasn't been said a million times on the internet before? One part influencer, one part campaign staff, one part digital troll, one part internet commentator, one part political hitman, according to Marianne Williamson. Yeah, but so basically what we kind of do is we are on Twitter and now every platform and kind of talk about what it's like to be working on campaigns, comment on pop culture, build community for campaign staff, promote unions and socialism and all those fun things. I don't know. It's like it's a meme page, but it contains multitudes, you know?
And star of Fox News, too, right?
Hell yeah.
I can't see anything out of this mask. I'm gonna be real with y'all.
Okay, Jesse, they are focused on climate change and pronouns and furries, apparently. Is that going to win people back?
Was that a panda?
It would look like
Okay.
a panda.
Okay. And was that Kamala?
I mean, antagonist of Fox News, I'd say more than star, but yeah, they aren't paying me, unfortunately. Although if they want to have me become a local lefty contributor, I'd love to be a talking panda head.
I'm sure they would love that. Honestly, they would. They would. They'd think it's good propaganda for them the same way that they're all putting their South Park images on their profile pictures now. See Charlie Kirk with that?
Yeah, and who's the other one? DHS.
Kristi
Kristi
Noem,
Noem.
which is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's not exactly a flattering portrayal, but I guess they've never really cared about, that stuff.
She cared for a split second, saying it was sexist to mock her appearance, and then suddenly she made a dark Brandon version for her own profile picture. So clearly she did not
She
care.
didn't like the part where they animated her Botox face falling off, but she seemed to like the power pose image of her that they gave her. So that's what that is.
It's crazy that she didn't object to the part where she murdered several dogs. But, what can you say
she
about
wrote
her
about
that
it
she
in
hasn't
her
said
book.
about herself?
I think I mentioned this theory on this podcast once before, but I truly believe that Kristi Noem was picked for this position not in spite of her shooting dogs, but because of it. Because these people really do see the immigrants she's going after as animals, and they want somebody to shoot them, as despicable as that sounds.
I 100% agree, especially because when it was first announced, I mean, I was still at Crooked and we were all talking about it. It was kind of a brief headline on the left for a while. And so they definitely used that to her advantage. There's definitely a reason she put that in there. She made her mark for sure.
To be fair,
Yeah.
though, I mean, it killed her VP chances. So you win some, you lose some.
I think she's having more fun now than she would in JD Vance's shoes.
Yeah.
In her sick and twisted way. It got her exactly where her demented head needed to be. It's all a
Whatever.
reality show. I mean, you've got Judge Janine now prosecuting crime in DC, which, speaking of crime in DC, we need to get into the federal takeover of DC because, I mean, I'll admit I'm a transplant, but I've lived here now for over 5 years, and it is terrifying the way that I just see federal agents out and about, almost like babysitting our police officers. And I will say I am more scared now of the felon in the White House and what he's doing than I have ever been at any point of crime in DC. And I lived here through 2020, through all of the protests the last time he declared a fake emergency. So we can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I joke, and obviously it's very serious, but it's a crazy time to announce that I was moving to DC. And then, I don't think it's reaction to me, but the timing suggests it. No, it's very, I mean, obviously disturbing. Disturbing but expected almost is part of the problem, is that it's like, yeah, like, of course he did that, but also, like, the fact that he did it is not normal. But I think, like, that's one of the things that's hard, is it's just all desensitized and overwhelming.
Oh, yeah, but it's also, I mean, part of it too isn't just the fact that he did it, but how he did it and why he did it. Because I want to back up here for anyone who hasn't been following this story from the start. I kind of had a feeling this was coming last week when I saw in local news that a Doge staffer who goes by the name of Big Balls, who I think we all know, or some of us know if we're terminally online, one of the Doge boys, or one of the Doge bags as I like to call them, was supposedly out at like 3 a.m. with his girlfriend, which, first red flag of this story, how the hell does a guy named Big Balls have a girlfriend? But put that aside, he allegedly was supposedly attempted carjacked at like 3 a.m. by a couple teenagers. Police arrested them immediately, and then cut to 10 a.m. Monday morning when Trump has a press conference about this federal takeover of DC in response to the Big Balls incident that just so happens to coincide with the exact moment a federal judge announced that the Epstein files, or the thing that they're claiming is the Epstein files, the red herring grand jury testimony in the Maxwell case, isn't being released. I know that was a lot to take in.
I also just want to say that it's so interesting to see that they use this one incident of a carjacking. I mean, my car's been broken into. I live in Los Angeles. All they took were my reusable bags. Whoever needed them.
Seriously?
Yeah, I just had like a box of reusable bags. I just left them in my car because it's California. You pay extra for plastic. And I just collect them, I guess. And that's all they took. They didn't take anything else. But it's interesting to see that that's the reaction that Trump has. And I know it's not specifically off of that. They were looking for an excuse to take this action. And this just kind of happened to be the best one. But there are so many college campuses or universities where young women are, trigger warning for sexual assault, but like raped or sexually assaulted, and they don't immediately turn around and shut down and throw more police on campus. It's more of slid under the rug. And so when I think of this 19-year-old guy, this Doge guy, who's already ruined the lives of millions of Americans. I mean, directly, let's be real. What has Doge done for us since January? And then seeing the response.
Stolen our social security numbers?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just, as a woman and also as a survivor of sexual assault, it's really interesting to see how one 19-year-old boy is carjacked with an immediate response from law enforcement, and now an entire city is under lock and key and is living basically in fear of doing one wrong thing. I mean, there's people that were smoking cigarettes on their porch and they were yelled at by the police. I saw a clip of that. And so
that one was insane.
It's just frustrating. You don't see it replicated anywhere else, but it's just the testing ground. We know what he's doing. We know it's not supposed to make sense because he just needs an excuse to go at this stuff.
It's also just putting on a show, and that's what this is really about, because if you look at who's actually out there, it's quite literally federal agents from every federal agency who have zero training doing actual policing. I don't know, did you see, I think, a perfect summary of how all of this actually looks? Did you guys see the guy who threw a sandwich at an FBI agent?
I did.
So that, either way, I'm going to show the entire clip for anyone who hasn't seen it, because as funny as it is, I think it's actually also a perfect case study in exactly how far we can go to speak up against these guys. Take a look at this.
Fuck you! Fuck you, bitches! Shame! Shame! Shame!
Motherfucker! Oh!
A lot happening there, but how great was that?
An incredible use of privilege. Was my first thought.
Yeah, it's insane how long those cops let him go up to the moment he threw that sandwich. And I think that actually says a lot about the privilege we can use to stand up to these guys.
I think it also points out, like, I studied in college, surprisingly, humor as an anti-fascist tool. And one of the things that academics have found is humor is really, especially against strongmen and strongmen politics, it points out the weaknesses. It points out kind of the lack of authority that they actually have. I think this is a great example of like where that meets meme politics. Not to relate everything to memes, but like, you know, you saw like afterwards how like the vigilantism, I know that that's like a very strong word for it, but also like Luigi Mangione, but also back in Trump 1, Richard Spencer getting punched, things like that had such viral appeal.
Yeah.
Even like the soup for my family thing from the 2020 uprising with Trump talking about these quote unquote left agitator strategies, but like that being mocked because of the absurdity. Like, I think that there's something real about pointing out how absurd this stuff is through the use of humor that like resonates on the internet, obviously.
Oh, yeah, and it's why South Park is doing so well with this stuff. The complete mockery they've made of Trump. I mean, even to the point where they brought back their Saddam Hussein character, but also the way they've now made fun of this ICE stuff, too. Like, I don't know if you saw in the second episode of this new season that the school counselor was fired because of budget cuts to counselors in public schools, and he still needed to make money, so he found out he could get a nice bonus joining ICE and ended up being part of Kristi Noem's hit squad.
And
South
that's
Park
genuinely,
welcomes the resistance, I
Okay.
guess.
yeah, and that's genuinely what's happening literally today. I mean, look at the amount of teachers who are getting pink slipped every year, despite there being a teacher shortage nationwide. Where are they going to go? This is a direct result of, especially when you see that ICE recruits are being given the opportunity to have their student loans forgiven, but our nurses and doctors and teachers and all of our public servants under Trump don't get those benefits, and those are the people we actually need.
Is that why people signed up for the Gestapo?
Well, you never know.
Not gonna go there, but I'm gonna go there. Anyway.
I mean, if you look at like the places where these jobs are most available historically, right? Like border towns in Texas, like you see people that were not emerging Hitlerites 10 years ago. But as we've seen in the RGV, that shift is quick, and the economic aspects that they're able to tie it in. I mean, how many people in Germany in the 30s and 40s were looking for upward mobility and latched on? I mean, it's not that that's not an excuse for it, but they draw you in, and it's a recruiting tool that there is economic opportunity, and then the rest is history, literally.
Exactly. And it's not an excuse, but it's a really important explanation of historical analysis and the historical analysis we need to be doing so we're not doomed to repeat this junk, because it's kind of feeling like we are a little bit. But there's one other element of this whole DC story I want to pivot from the bleak historical analysis that everyone seems to be doing these days to one specific DC Democrat who has not really been out all that much. It's been surprising given her unique position, supposedly to advocate for the District of Columbia. Eleanor Holmes Norton, our non-voting delegate in Congress, whose literal only job is to speak up for us. She's 88 years old, announced she's running for re-election, but has not been on camera once about this takeover, and we're now 3 days into it.
Well, I feel like even just saying that she announced that she's running for re-election doesn't do justice to her continuously saying that she's running for re-election and her staffers being like, no, she didn't mean that. That's not the case. Like, repeatedly.
Yeah, that.
Which is not necessarily a good sign. And here's the thing. She's my mutual.
She's my mutual too.
She's done some good things, but I think we keep seeing this thing where it's like, what is the purpose of having representation, right? What is the point of being in these things? And it cannot be personal pride, personal opportunity at this point. And I think we've seen what that results in. And I think we've seen what candidates that end up taking their personal opportunities above their public interests, and like where that's led the Democrats. And like it's so hard to say what should be done about this stuff, right? Like obviously primaries are a good option, obviously pressure campaigns, but like unfortunately there's free will still, and there's no real way of regulating this on a larger scale in a way that like, it's not like we can just be like, Ken Martin, do X, right? It's like, okay, we need to like literally shift people away from individualism. We need to shift people away from kind of this like politics as an opportunity for personal power and like profit. And like, I don't know, I'm excited to see how many people are running for primaries and how many people are challenging things. And I'm also like, we need 10 times more of that, which is why if everyone's listening, either run for office, or if there's someone in your community that's running for office, help them do it, because we need a bunch of leaders, and we also need a bunch of people that support those leaders.
Yeah, 100%. There is, though, one flip side to this that I was thinking of as you talk about this. It's half the battle is the elected leaders who are on camera, who are the face of this all, but then there's also their staff who work in these offices who, if this person doesn't run again, they're out of a job, and then what's next for them? And did you see the tweet that Eleanor Holmes Norton's communications director put out about her statement on the takeover on Monday?
No.
That she was very busy writing the statement.
Yeah.
So please don't ask her about it.
Yeah, telling reporters, more specifically, I think that reporters asking about the statement was delaying her writing the statement.
Which is incredible because, like you said earlier, Jordan, you kind of saw this coming. Even I kind of had an inkling across the country out in California, like, he's preparing to do this. They've got this press conference. So why are you working on your statement hours after the fact? If you kind of haven't, like, we all who pay attention, who are at least somewhat involved, saw this coming. So it's kind of a bad thing and a bad look for you if you're not ready.
As the Capitol Hill comms director?
Well, also, like, and not to dunk, although maybe a little bit, but like, there's something called do not disturb. If you don't want reporters texting you because you're busy, like, just don't pick up their phone calls. Just don't respond to I cannot imagine being a political professional who does comms and be like, why are all these interviewers trying to like reach me? Because that's your job. Like, I really hate this like woe is me thing that the Dems sometimes do, where they're like, what do you expect me to do? And it's like, well, everything, first of all. Like, we need people that are going above and beyond. And like, I've seen a couple people that are, foot on the gas, like taking this opportunity as it comes, but like the vast majority of people aren't. And it's very much I feel like a lot of people are kind of resting on what got them to, the positions of power that they're in, and not transforming. It's one of the reasons that, like, I'm really not considering at this point Kamala as an option for me, because she hasn't done anything since, right? I understand going away. I understand taking some time. But if you can't right now figure out how to get yourself involved in a way that, like, helps the movement, how do I know that you're going to do that 2 years from now or whatever, right? Like,
yeah,
I value the people that show up more than even like their ideology. It's one of the reasons I think like Pete, who I disagree with on pretty much every issue, like, is a pretty good messenger, because he does hard things. And like that I appreciate more than someone who's in my camp, who I'm not going to name, that like I've just not seen show up since being elected, and like gets all the progressive bona fides of like being associated with everyone else. And it's like, well, but like, where are you? What are you doing?
Well, I couldn't agree more. And more to that, I think you mentioning Pete is a perfect example, because even the three of us on this podcast disagree about all of these issues. And as New Digital Now, we are a big tent organization. We don't get into the specifics of the socialists versus the moderates and the swing states, because we need all of us to band together to build an organizing infrastructure where we can work together to build a coalition. And with Kamala, it's interesting because I have seen her doing one thing, which is sending texts and emails asking for money for the Harris Fight Fund. I don't know if you've gotten any of those.
Gotten a few.
I have, which also it's like, I don't know, after we lost, there were all these meetings and all these things that were like, the fight's not over. We're going to keep pushing back. We're going to like make the world the place that we deserve, right? And it's like, well, when's that happening? And like, here's the thing. I can't imagine, sucks to lose any race. I've lost student council races that have me bummed out.
Oh, same.
Real.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, I'm usually bummed out about election results, but like, I can't imagine running for president and losing and how hard that is. But also, it's like, but it's much harder to be, a trans person in the South or an immigrant being detained. Like, that's the type of stuff where like press release, and also like, we don't have a leader. We don't have leadership right now. And this isn't just a Kamala Harris. This would have been true of probably most people that could have run last time. And I mean, I think that's the thing, is like, these are anecdotes, but these are systemic issues, right? It's not targeting one person specifically. It's like, okay, but as a party, we are bad at doing this.
Yeah.
Or even as beyond a party.
Yeah. No, we are horrible at coordinating our messaging.
I think it also goes hand in hand with the fact that we see so many clips and videos that voters are reposting on social media, not just politicos, but they're like, oh my gosh, Kamala called that he was going to do these tariffs. They knew this was going to happen. Why didn't we listen? And like, okay, as the Democratic Party, we knew this was going to happen. There were so many of us that read Project 2025 from top to bottom, and yet we still were unprepared for when it actually happened. And so, like Memes was saying, when Kamala's not showing up, it's like, okay, but you all knew this was going to happen. We have clips, videos, evidence that we all knew if Trump was elected, this was going to happen. And yet we still have no real solution for that. And I think that's what drives voters even more nuts. It's like, well, if you knew this was going to happen and you still don't have a plan, I guess if you had won, you wouldn't have had a plan to make anything better either. I think that's a lot of the frustration that people are getting at too.
I also think it's like, you can't run on everything is so dangerous, this is such a calamity waiting to happen, and then be like, well, why is everyone mad at me for not being ready for this? And also, I mean, we knew the polling internally.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't. And I honestly think that that's one of the parts that's weird too, is I think that is obviously information that needs to be kept semi-secret. I know, like, there were friends of mine that were in data were very close-lipped about it, but according to Tim Walz himself, he didn't know, right? Like,
I believe that.
I believe that too. But like, there were people that very much saw, especially given that we didn't know that the switch was going to happen and no one could have predicted that. We could have had a full filibuster-proof Republican Senate had things gone as bad as they could have gone, right? So like, the idea that we weren't prepared when a year out we were almost going to lose Virginia and Minnesota, according to internal polling that I posted after the election, that's crazy to me, because I was thinking about it constantly. And it's like one of the reasons I joined DSA, right? Is understanding that there needs to be a full left movement ready for this moment. And to be honest, I don't feel like DSA has done enough either. I think that there's a flat-footedness of just like the entirety of the left outside of like maybe 5 like individual candidates.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And also blackpilling as hell.
Memes, could you just elaborate for our supporters real quick what you mean by the data team? Like, what does a data team do specifically on a presidential campaign?
Yeah, for sure. Taking the public polls and the private polls and asking the private polls and like turning that into data that makes decisions and guides strategy, right? So, and I don't understand this shit. I'm not a data person and I've never claimed to be one. I'm very much a comms person, and humanity is not STEM. But you see that we're down in this specific suburb in Atlanta, and then you ask questions about whether they're most concerned about crime versus immigration versus wealth inequality. And also, let me just say a shout out to that data team. They were pretty much, according to what I've heard, spot on in terms of where we were at pretty much, I think, most of the time. I mean, it's hard to tell because who knows what a week before the election things would have looked like. And that's the other thing that I think is so hard, right? Is like, you were only pulling that moment. So it's also the job of a good campaign manager to see through what is and see what could be. But also, I mean, if you aren't making informed decisions based on data, you're kind of going blind. But it is also, it's an art, not a science as well, because you don't know non-response rates. You can't really understand who is really going to go to the polls that day. Where's going to get wet. I'm not a Nate Silver person. I don't think that it's all numbers because it's people. But like, I think that like there were some truly like very, very smart, very, very talented people on the data team. And that's one of those jobs that never gets the props it deserves, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Democratic committee leadership does not appreciate their data teams nearly enough. And it is a major problem. Along
and don't
with
fund it enough, to be honest.
No, they do not. But I mean, put
Which is
aside.
not true on Harris, by the way.
No, not true on Harris, but certainly true in the standing Democratic committees that do a lot of the congressional, legislative, and statewide and local campaigns. And that's a problem for our down ballot races that, unfortunately, in the lack of a presidential year, there is not nearly enough resources for messaging, data, organizing, comms coordination, all of the above, which I think is how we end up in a place where when there is a presidential campaign, everyone's just trying to mimic it, asking for money. And when there isn't, all the text messages are just flooding whatever some consultant thinks is the next biggest issue. And that is the most important thing to Democratic supporters, with the lack of any kind of real cohesive message.
One thing I will say to those of you at home that are not like me and have a mind for numbers and are maybe looking to get into the political fields, data is one of the places that is easiest to join a campaign. People are always looking for talented data folks. It's also one of those things that has robust training programs. Arena, I think, is a good place to start, but I know also Data Diva is a great resource on Twitter. She's a account that is incredibly good at helping other people understand this stuff, and it is part of the reason I take as much appreciation. But it's also one of the things that will always have a job.
Oh, yeah.
That and fundraising, which I'm sure we will talk about later, are
Yeah.
the things that are always the skill shortage of Dem politics, because you actually need a very hard skill. Not that it's not a hard skill to be able to talk to people on doors, but it's not viewed as one by people that make decisions, because it's where they just send the masses.
Oh, yeah, and let's actually just get into fundraising right now, because it is actually what I would say, beyond a lack of skill in the industry, I would say that our entire industry doesn't know how to fundraise, because if you have ever given even $1 to a Democratic campaign, you know that it just leads to even more and more and more text messages, emails, all of the above, asking you for money, because the approach seems to be just send every donor a message, because even if 0.1% of them click through and donate, then you'll make your money back and you'll raise more money and have grassroots donors. And then you go to other donors and say, all these donors are here. And some of them don't even know what they're donating to we run a focus group of these donors precisely to solve this issue. And 91% tell us that they get over 5 messages a day, 64% over 10 messages a day.
I'd say I probably average 7.
Yeah.
And the thing that sucks too is that part of the reason I do is because I believe in small dollar donations, and I give to the split, right? We gave we're giving 18 different Pennsylvania House Democrat races that are the closest 16 money, and I chip into all of those. They all get my contact. They all get my stuff. And it's I was doing what you wanted me to do, right? I'm participating the way that I'm supposed to, and it's frustrating.
Yeah. I gotta say, though, what's more frustrating than the number of messages, because, as an organizer, as a fundraiser, we all need to send our messages to get the word out. It's the content of those messages. Because one of the other questions I ask people, I straight up ask them, do you want it to stop? Do you like the messages you're getting? Or do you just want better content? Only 9% of them said they wanted it to stop altogether. 51% said they just wanted the content fixed. And we put an other comment option in there too. And a lot of people, what they were saying was they wanted to see the messaging centralized in some way, just so that they were actually getting useful updates in these messages and able to actually interact with the Democratic Party that they support financially and with their time, instead of feeling like they're just being sucked for an ATM and being shamed and scared into giving more and more.
That's one of the things that also, as someone that does digital in a non-fundraising capacity, we are taking away my ability to run a good digital program, because that's not how I run things, right?
No.
I want to be able to use text tools to actually recruit volunteers, right? I want to use text tools to actually educate people that there was a major change in voting rights law, and that they need to re-register to vote, and they need to check, and they need to make sure their friends know, right? The way that we communicate with people, it's crazy, because I've been going to all these events, right? As an influencer, they've been inviting me to cover their stuff. And the through line that I've seen is, when you're reaching out to an influencer, you are doing comms, but they don't see it like that, right? There's a lack of your messaging needs to, if you're going to message anyone, it needs to be through a comms understanding, right? It needs to be through a comms focus where you are maintaining and developing a relationship. You're organizing that person, right? And like the way that I've seen all these places, they don't do the political education for me to cover their event well. And then they also, in their correspondences, are often very like don't realize like this is part of it. Like this could be part of the story if you are unorganized or if you are saying things you shouldn't be, right? If you're not accommodating, if you're not transparent. And I'm luckily more friendly. I'm not trying to put people on blast at most of these things like I would at, a Republican event. I want these places to succeed. That's why I go to them and that's why I usually go for free. But there's like we would never have an elected go up and say the things that we have them text, right?
Oh, God, no.
Can
They
you
probably
imagine?
don't even know the things that we're having them text in a lot of cases, and it's truly insane to me. And I mean, it is the reason we built this forum to allow influencers and ultimately candidates and leaders of organizations to come on here, get in front of the audience of Democratic donors that we've selected for this focus group based on past donation history, as well as anyone who wants to join from the podcast, from the YouTube channel, from our social medias. We want to give anyone who's raising money or doing the work in the Democratic Party the forum to get in front of everyone and tell us about what they're really doing instead of having to pretend you're somebody else to even have a chance at making money.
And I think with the amount of, specifically talking about fundraising text messages, but the amount of text that so many different campaigns use, and a lot of them, if they see one strategy works for somebody else, they're going to adopt that whether or not it actually is going to be effective for them. But in addition to that, voters don't know the differences between these different types of text. So when I was working for Next Gen during the 22 cycle, we were sending out a lot of peer-to-peer texts. So those were text messages that were coming from volunteers. They had a text that they'd send out. They had responses that they could reply depending on what the voter said back to them. And those were genuinely people who were clicking and sending and trying to help folks register to vote. They weren't even fundraising texts. But at the same time, Next Gen was also sending out fundraising texts, but those were more of SMS. So their data team and their fundraising teams were just sending those out, and then there wasn't necessarily a volunteer responding to them. It was a little bit more automated. But when I met somebody just literally getting drinks, I think the week after Election Day out in Los Angeles, and I was saying, oh, my job was to send political text messages. They pulled out their phone. They were like, oh, a text message like this. And it was literally a text message from my Next Gen team. It was just reminding them about Election Day. And they responded with a meme of Mario pulling down his pants and showing his asshole. And I was like, oh, actually, you responded to one of my 65-year-old volunteers with that, and I'm sure you scarred them for life, because voters also think that they're sending so many text messages, this must all be automated, and that's also how we burn out our volunteers. Because then our volunteers are seeing either these weird memes or there's some violent responses. There was one, I don't know if you are aware, both of you, of the Navy SEALs copy pasta, but it's like, I'm a member of the US Navy or whatever. And it's kind of graphic. Somebody literally wanted me to call the police, and I had to explain, no, it's just a copy pasta. But those are the situations that we get ourselves in when we are not as clear about what we were doing and how things work, in a sense that it is more intuitive for voters to understand. And that's to our own detriment, because we're burning out volunteers, and then folks are just more likely to ignore the fundraising text messages.
And I mean, we're making it literally to the point where Apple is changing its way of taking in text, because people were like, well, that's the thing too, is I literally miss text messages from my friends and family.
Same.
And it's like, I'm sorry, but like, that's ridiculous. Like, the point of my phone is not to be a receptacle for your grift pack. And it's never the good people that they're fundraising for. No, Simone, I totally agree. I did texting, volunteer texting stuff was a huge part of my job in 2020 before we really got to the point of the spam being as spam.
Yeah.
Although we were already there. And I remember just someone sent back the most just like, I don't even know the word to use that is respectful. Maybe batshit.
Okay.
just like pages of just rambling right-wing lunacy, I guess. And I remember screenshotting it, and then I don't know how this happened, but I accidentally sent an attachment of it instead of a different attachment at some point, and I got called into HR
Oh
at
no.
the campaign, and they were like, hey, why did you send this right-wing manifesto to like HQ? And I was like, oh, that was me screenshotting to like flag. Very quickly, they were like, okay, like that makes sense. It was crazy that there was a chance that it was, they were understanding because of the nature of my job. But I was in trouble for like 15 minutes until I explained it. And it's like, yeah, like that was bad for my mental health. Not that this job isn't just like devastatingly brutal on anyone that is susceptible to, stress-based stuff, which if you can't tell by now, I'm neurotic. But we had like 14-year-old volunteers. We had 90-year-old volunteers, right? Like we had grandmas, and they were getting some things that were like dark depths of the internet type shit. And it was like, okay, like this isn't working in the way that we think that it's working. And like people are rugged and people are willing to do stuff for this cause because it's so scary, but like not forever.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And even put all of the insane situations that obviously never should be happening aside, the routine stuff on the fundraising side, too, is a problem. Like the number of people who, I think the two most devastating things I read in the focus group responses, because we really do go through and read every single response that's submitted in our web forms. And two of the things I read constantly. First, the number of people, and if you are listening to this and you are one of these people, stop donating right now. We do not need your money that badly. The number of people who have ended up in like 10, 20, 30, $40,000 of credit card debt because they truly believed that their money was needed to save democracy, that if they didn't donate, the world would collapse, and they got in debt. The PAC they gave to kept the money, did nothing to stop what's happening now, and everything's still collapsing.
And they believed that because that's what they were told. That is the messaging that is used over and over again. Like, of course they believed that. And in some cases, I was also donating because I was just so stressed out and scared, and I was still working and doing the work.
Yeah.
It's just
And they
something
believed
again.
that every message came from someone who was actually doing the work.
Well, that's the thing I think that is so frustrating about all of this, is that it is built on decades of trust and decades of belief in if you get involved, you can make a difference.
Yeah.
And the people in our industry who are making so much fucking money, by the way. Like, that's the thing
Millions.
too. Like,
Millions.
it's not that this is going and we need to be Machiavellian because that's how we win elections. The fact that we're Machiavellian is because these people are taking 30% off of the top and just buying their fifth house. And that's the thing that's so hard about it, is it's the Trumpian aspect of the Democratic Party.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. That is a really good way to put it.
And like, that's one of the reasons that like I have been drawn to DSA. And I know that I keep bringing that up, but there is a overt disdain for that part. There is no one making millions off of DSA, partially because we are cripplingly underfunded. But
Yeah.
like there, and it's got its issues too, don't get me wrong. But the fact that we have all these people that don't care at the top of political fundraising and political work in general, that like don't care about these issues. If they could get more money doing it for a Republican. I mean, the fact that fucking Hustle, which is one of the text banking apps and phone banking apps, is owned by a literal Trump fundraiser.
Oh, yeah. Or that Lindy Lee went to Fox News the minute she ran out of money to make on the left as a grifter there. She went to go be a former left right-wing grifter.
For sure.
Yeah.
I remember this boss of mine at a place that I used to work being like, first and foremost, I'm a capitalist. And I'm like, well, that is part of the problem.
Okay, we will get into the DSA and the capitalists versus socialists of it
For
all
sure.
in a second. But I want to take it back first to something you said about the trust that was built over decades and that is unfortunately very quickly now eroding, because the other, I'd mentioned there were two things that stick out to me in these focus groups. The second of those is the number of people who say in their responses that I know nobody's ever going to read this, or I know this is just another way to ask for money, and they think they're just shouting into a void. And it makes me so sad because yes, we do have to ask for money because like any grassroots organization that isn't funded by billionaires, we also are are 100% reliant on small dollar donors, but we ask respectfully, and we genuinely do read and care about your opinion whether or not you donate. And my spreadsheet that shows all of the responses doesn't actually show me whether or not a particular respondent donated. And I set that up that way intentionally because I actually, when I read those responses, I don't want to know. I just know that that's a person who took the time to tell us their thoughts, and whether or not you donated, your response has equal value to me.
Yeah, and hearing that kind
Yeah.
of feedback and those opinions and responses from supporters, especially at the end of the day, not only makes us a better digital media organization, but also personally, it makes me feel like I'm becoming a better organizer. It's so hard to connect with folks, especially digitally nowadays. And I think that's another big reason why the Democrats are kind of failing with their online messaging in comparison to the right. It's really nice to be able to see these are real people responding. Here's how they're feeling. And that shapes the way I view the world and the way I view our country right now. It provides that earned perspective that I'm not necessarily seeing in between the bots on the algorithm and all of those different things. And especially for me, because I'm across the country from Jordan, I'm in a completely almost different kind of American culture. So hearing supporter responses and being able to digest those and understand those are actually helpful in the long run, because not only are they making us better organizers, better communicators, better messengers, but that also allows us to come onto this podcast and have guests such as Memes and all learn from it and be able to take that. So just a quick thank you to everybody who does respond to our surveys, because they're genuinely helping to shape the perspective and the new movement that we need on the left.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who's ever submitted, donated, even watched this podcast. We couldn't do any of it without you. And with that, I now want to get back into a bit of kind of your background and where you come at this from. I know you keep mentioning Memes DSA and being a part of DSA. Do you mind telling our viewers a little bit more about what exactly that is and what it does?
Yeah, so, and I'm not the expert on this stuff, as I was at convention last weekend, which is one of the reasons it's so top of mind. And I learned just how little I know, because everyone there really knows a lot about this stuff. But DSA is Democratic Socialists of America. It's, I think, the largest left-leaning group in America. That's really the reason I'm part of it, is it's kind of a catch-all for a lot of different left projects that are chapter based. So every city or every region, not every region, but lots of them have chapters doing electoral, political organizing work, doing mutual aid work, doing political education. And I think they've become kind of or at least one of the driving forces of a certain sect of left candidates. I think Zoran and AOC being kind of the two big ones, but I think the movement really was inspired deeply, although it's, I think, moving away from now the campaigns of Bernie Sanders. And I think it kind of pushes away from kind of the Bill Clinton style Democratic Party that I think we still remain in, and much more towards the left roots that I think drew a lot of people, the populist roots that drew a lot of people to the Democratic Party. I think, like, we talked about trust, right? Like, who built that trust was not Bill Clinton, clearly. Right.
Or Hillary's staff, who are still involved in the back channels of power in the Democratic Party.
No, it was the merging of New Deal politics into, there's a history of the Democratic Party, I think, that resonated with people and like build that trust, as we were saying. And it's the people that actually gave people better worlds. And I think plenty of people in DSA would say that that's not the goal either, and that it's an explicit communist. And, there's 1,000 factions within the party.
Yeah.
And like, that's normal. Not that there aren't 1,000 factions in, any party, because people like to disagree on minutia. But that's kind of where I come from, is they're, especially in blue cities, the only people putting pressure from the left on these candidates that are, I think a great example in LA, there was that whole scandal around one of the city council members being recorded saying racial epithets and things like that. The one that didn't resign was running for re-election, and the candidate that ended up actually running, because there wasn't an organized push from anyone else, was the DSA candidate who beat him and now is a member of LA City Council.
Yeah.
So I got to interview at the LA Bernie AOC event, and is really cool, and really, that's, I think, part of it is that so much of this party is, the Democratic Party is resistant to change unless actively forced.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that it's good to be actively forcing them, regardless of whether you agree with them on every issue.
Let me ask you something, and I don't want to come off here like I'm taking shots either, because I think we've spoken to the importance of all of us who agree that what's happening right now is not working, need to be coming together regardless of our individual ideologies. And specifically with the use of the word socialist in the name of the organization and as a driving factor. Obviously, Republicans love to use that word like an insult, and I think a lot of Americans are scared of the idea of socialism, whether it's remnants of the Cold War or just never actually having seen it work in practice. Do you think that DSA as an organization is able to organize with non-socialist Democrats, and what role do you see it playing in a big tent effort to just get rid of the fascists?
I think one thing that I will say at least is they're going to call us socialists regardless. If we have good socialists and socialism becomes tied instead of to the Cold War, which is one of the reasons it isn't working on young people, to at least on average, to be like, that's a socialist. Well, that doesn't mean anything to us because we weren't alive, or at least weren't coherent during the Cold War. But if instead it becomes related to, I mean, like, that's the thing, right? I think one of the things that Bernie changed about it is being a Democratic Socialist means that you're like Bernie Sanders than you're like Mao or Lenin or something like that. And I think there's plenty of people in the DSA that are not happy about that and would like to be known as the, whichever leftist revolutionary. And like, that's fine. We are a multi-tendency organization with plenty of disagreement. I can assure you plenty of disagreement. But like, I think that's part of it is, right? If we show people how we can make actual progressive changes, plenty of those changes, things that I think plenty of the good Democrats want to do as well, right? Like, that's, I think part of it is the things that the DSA is focusing on, I think, are parts of what would make it into, for the most part, a more popular Democratic Party, right? Getting rid of the worst Democrats in power, being more strong on human rights abroad, and campaign finance things, an end to the two-party system, right? Like, those are all things that I think most of us would largely agree with in the party, and that, which is the way I think the party in the post-Trump era is moving, right? Like, we saw
Yeah.
Zoran beat out 1,000 other types of milquetoast Democrat.
Yeah, I think Zoran's going to be a really interesting case study in what kind of this new breed of politics actually looks like in the field, because to me, it's like all of those things you listed. I'm like, yeah, in theory, 100%, those all sound like great things. But then you get into the minutia of the details of what each and every one of them actually means and how it looks in practice. And then the question becomes, how willing are these candidates, once they become government officials, to work with the other people both within their party and, I mean, ideally in a post-Trump world across the aisle, in a world where we can disagree productively, to be okay with getting 50, 60, 70, 80% of what we want versus taking to the streets and, I mean, for lack of a better example, having more of a problem with Joe Biden's response to what's going on in Gaza than a problem with Trump. It seems like leftists are more mad at Democrats than they are at Republicans sometimes. And correct me if I'm wrong here. It's just kind of the observation I've had.
I mean, I feel that way sometimes because one side's supposed to be good, right? It's like, yes, I expect more of my best friend than my worst enemy, but that doesn't mean that I have too high standards for my best friend. And I don't, not that my best friend is the Democratic Party. I would never say that. My best friend is the people of this planet. And that's, I think, also part of it is, I think, like, one of the things I've really enjoyed about DSA is like it actually has beliefs.
Yeah.
And like they are actively like in conversation about how the world should run. And I think that, like, you brought up a good point, right? There's that pragmatism of like, well, how does it actually look in practice? That's a hard thing to say too, but the Democratic Party has become so tied to what is possible and like what is like politically expedient that we are no longer the party of FDR or like, the Great Society, where we have these big, beautiful, like, understandings of the future. The part that I love about DSA, and one of the guiding things for me, is the line "a better world is possible" is actively one that I do not see almost ever in the Democratic Party. And like I think that that's partially because that falls flat when you've had power, right? And I think that's one of the things that like is a problem I have with DSA is it's very easy to be very pure outside of politics, but once you enter it, it's harder. But also like on the flip side, that's one of the things that why we lose to Trump, right? Is that we don't build these understandings. And here's an example, right? And I think that this was true both times that we lost to Trump was what was our message? What were we running on, right? And I think that this worked for Biden a little bit, but also I think he was in power and also the world was actively falling apart. But like I was knocking doors in 2016 in Rust Belt swing states, right? And I get to the door and I read the script and then they'd be like, so like what are you going to do for me though? Like actually, like how are you actually going to change, this place that has deindustrialized where at the time heroin was and opioid deaths were ravaging that place under a Democratic administration, under a Democratic 8 years, right? And my thing was like, Hillary's better on taxes. And it's like, well, that's not explaining. There was no key policy, right? Like that's the thing. One of the things that Trump and Bernie both did really well. You knew exactly what they were running on policy wise, right? It was front and center. You couldn't get away from, for Trump, MAGA, immigration, like drain the swamp. And for Bernie, how many times do you think he said millionaires and billionaires, right? But they gave a real reason, one, that we were failing, and two, what they were going to fucking do about it. And I don't feel like literally what was Kamala's main campaign issue? Winning and not being Trump, and maybe third is abortion.
Yeah.
Although we didn't even really go hardcore. Like she could have been going, like if that was our main issue, which I think maybe would have been actually one of the things that I would have ran stronger on. Was like, okay, then like go to abortion clinics, right? Like be interviewing women in Texas.
Yeah.
Like we were doing ads, but like it's not, I don't know. There was a problem, I think, in all these things where like, and also one of the reasons for all this stuff is issue testing, right?
Yeah.
We create these candidates that are completely hollow, ideologically at least.
Yeah.
And Kamala probably, if the issues had said that her having a gun was bad, she wouldn't have mentioned it. But because I'm sure it was up 10 points if she did have a gun.
Yeah. She poll tested her Oprah appearance.
And like I saw from the inside how slow we were to adapt because we were waiting on testing.
Ooh, that's
right.
That's rough.
We like the messaging, and like I was doing outward communication without messaging for a good chunk of 107 days, right? Like that is not a good thing, but it's because we were waiting to figure out what would win us the election. That is the losing way of running an election, I think.
Yeah, and just being scared to even address an issue because you don't have the perfect message on it.
I also think when we talk about waiting on testing, especially with Kamala, those like 100 days that she had to run for office, it also shows a failure in the off season of being able to continue to fund the infrastructure of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
100%.
For a lot of people who have never worked in politics or campaigns specifically, whether it's on the Dems or Republicans, typically after Election Day, you're kind of out of a job, whether it's like November 15th, or maybe they're kind enough to keep you on through December and then you can keep your health insurance for a little bit. But then there's no work for like between 3 to 8 months. It really depends until the next cycle starts hiring. And because of that time, we are just so used to our campaigns and our parties blowing all of that money. The Kamala Harris team memes, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure y'all were done before December. So then you have all of these staffers going home being like, yeah, we lost and like, I already don't have a job anymore, instead of maybe using that money to keep your staff a little bit longer, provide them with some financial security through the holidays, small things like that. In addition to don't spend $1 billion that you've fundraised specifically on ads, maybe spend $500 million and then save it a little bit more to contribute to the infrastructure year round. And when I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm talking about making sure that we're doing polling and testing and all that data stuff in the months that we aren't running an active election. You're going to get more realistic responses, I feel, from those folks who aren't being bombarded with a couple different candidates and a couple different talking points constantly. We need to continue this work even when it's not technically an election cycle. And that's why we end up with these races where, I mean, Kamala was an anomaly because she really only had 107 days, but you're spending all of this time during those days waiting and waiting. What's the best move when we could already have that stuff kind of settled? We could already have a lot of organizers and fundraisers ready to go. And that's just something the Democratic Party some years is better at, and then some years just completely falls flat on.
Yeah.
One other thing, and tying this back to our whole conversation, but that's true. And then we haven't even brought up the volunteers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have our volunteers go so hard, sign up for every shift, do every little thing you can. And then the moment the campaign's over, the only thing they'll be contacted about for the next year is the fundraising stuff, right? So even the people that we've built the relationships with,
Yes.
who want to keep going, who want to keep canvassing. Can you imagine if we kept, I think we knocked like $1 million a day or something last election or something crazy? If we had, even if we got 30% of people to stay on, think about how much impact we could have messaging about the big, beautiful bill before it happened, right? If we used those lists to populate protests against the big, beautiful bill everywhere and every district, because we have those lists, right? We have people in all those communities that volunteered for us, right? And instead, we're basically ghosting them.
Yeah.
And saying, you aren't, like, we don't need you for this entire period of time. Someone else is going to get to that person, probably. And if not, they're just going to kind of, it's the same as like when a show takes 3 years to have the 3rd season, and it's like, well, no one watches that show anymore.
Exactly.
The fandom is dead. I had a feeling that you'd appreciate that one. But I don't know. It's ridiculous. And it's inhuman. It's not how people work.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I noticed too, memes, I'm not sure if you saw this online. I read it the other day. I can't remember who posted it, but they said Bernie built such a great volunteer organizing Slack. And then after Election Day, it was kind of just deleted. And they were really disheartened by that. And they were kind of using that as a critique. And for me, on one hand, I understand just there's no staff to run a community of volunteers by the end of Election Day. So they either let it run rampant, which, trust me, I've worked on digital communities that should not be running rampant at all, and it just kind of goes haywire and it's unusable, or you just delete it. But the third option is just to continue to fund it or to transform it or to give that community to our volunteers. But we are just so used to, after Election Day, like November 15th or whatever day all these contracts end, we're done, we give up on our volunteers, and it sucks a lot, and it makes me sad, and it is a real critique. We should be continuing to mobilize these folks by creating a sustainable ecosystem to keep this work going year round.
I think it's also that we create this very professionalized and very corporate delineation between volunteers and staff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And volunteers are a resource to be like almost
Exploited.
exploited.
Yeah.
As well as donors that are funding you. And that's one of the things that I also appreciate of DSA is that it is a members-based organization, right? I pay in my dues and like, therefore I am an active member of this thing. And so like so much of what we do is not based on like a staff versus volunteer thing. It's a member to member, right? Like all the staff are member because they do have staff, but like the idea is not that they are the people in charge and then the rest of the people are like a resource is very much not how it works. And like that's one of the things I think has benefits and drawbacks, but I think we're talking about a lot of the benefits.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, similarly, that's what we're doing here. We are investing in a place where Democrats can have that conversation. And I think touching on everything you guys have just been saying, the need to be able to, especially in the off years, I mean, it's been tough for us this year. We'll be honest that donor engagement has dropped significantly since the election in our little focus group experiment, and we've had enough to keep it going. But the decrease in donor enthusiasm, unfortunately, does make it harder to invest in this conversation year round, which is why it is so much more important to make sure we have the platform running constantly where our supporters can talk both with each other and with the elected and hired leaders of these organizations to have these conversations and have them free of the poll testing too, because I think part of the reason we lose is when we have to test every message, we end up saying so little versus the right wing who Trump's rambling constantly. And I mean, he says a lot of things he shouldn't say, but it can only get so much traction because you're keeping up with the sheer volume of stuff that he's saying. Meanwhile, Democrats are so afraid to say anything on an issue that they don't have the details of exactly in lockstep that they end up being criticized even more for not saying anything at all.
I mean, honestly, I think being bad at self-criticism is the one thing that spans the entire political spectrum.
Yes.
And reacting poorly. I make fun of literally everyone on my platform. I mean, I guess not literally everyone, but I make fun of all the ideologies and the places that I think there are inconsistencies. And I've never found one that was like, you know what? You're right. This is a valid criticism of us and we're going to change it. Maybe it's the way I also approach it, maybe sometimes not conducive to that in the first place, but I don't know. I think that I agree. I think literally, listener, you too, take a second to think about where your movement, your politics is insufficient, right? Because we are clearly not in the place that we need to be.
Oh, this organization was built on the very foundation that our entire ecosystem is broken. We built this entire organization to be an arm of self-criticism for every part of the Democratic Party. And I mean, that's why I ask you these questions. And
For sure.
we will ask these questions of everyone who comes on this platform. I actually, to close this out, want to show you, we did a quick interview with a Texas state representative, Rafael Anchia, who is one of the representatives who left the state for Illinois. And we asked him, how is what they're doing going to be effective? And he gave us a great response.
So one of the things that we do at New Digital now is we want to help lift up Americans' voices who feel like they've been lost. And so when we told people that we had the opportunity to speak with you, we asked them what questions they would like to ask you. And the number one question that was asked was, do you think preventing quorum will work? And can you kill this bill forever by not allowing a vote?
We have to have attainable goals. Goal number one, check. We've changed the debate on redistricting. Big deal. If we had just stayed in Texas and rolled over and they would have run us over with the maps, we would never be having this national discussion. Number two, get other states focused on redistricting to see if A, Texas backs down, or if they don't, if they move forward with the gerrymandering, to counteract that. So that Donald Trump can't rig the next election, right? And check, that's happening. We expect maps from other states, at least one other state, to be dropped either today or Monday, okay? And other states have put that in motion. So that's been a big win. And then finally, our goal is to run out the clock on this session. The next step after that is to fight in the courts, right? We testified in federal court for about 10 hours in early June on the existing maps. I suspect we will have civil rights groups file suit in federal court to try to stop these maps because they are clear violations of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. So that will be the next step once and if they pass this map.
Yeah, it's hard to find words to describe how everyone's feeling about this and just what they can do besides, supporting and sending, money and donating and things like that. What are other things that not just us, but everyone around the entire country or people who are in Texas, what are things that they can do to continue to help support all of your efforts and the Texas legislature's efforts throughout this whole process?
Well, money's always important. And, every $5 contribution, I've gotten some $2.50 contributions, sent to my campaign account. Love that. Really, really do appreciate it. And it's less the amount and more just people thinking about us. And that really buoys our spirits. The other thing that's, I think, really important, and I'm a person who believes in positive energy and good thoughts and prayer. So people who want to send us good thoughts, good vibes, prayers, well wishes, that's always terrific. And honestly, when our state office mailbox gets filled up with people saying you're doing the right thing, this is a historic moment. They always try to arrest the people who are on the right side of history, right? Those messages are incredibly heartwarming and help center us because this work is really hard. I got to tell you, I've broken quorum before, but it's hard. It's hard.
Just wanted to show you that to kind of bring things back from the theoretical to the practical of really what Democrats can be doing in this moment, because I think we're having a lot of these debates about what's next, what are we going to do. Meanwhile, there's very little we can do until at least the midterms on a congressional level, on a federal level. So I really think it's so important that we pay attention down ballot to the state level stuff. I know, Memes, have you been following the Texas-California battle? What's your take on it at the moment?
There's a level of fight, I think, that this exemplifies that, like, I wish that I was seeing at every level. Obviously, they have a very specific institutional lever and mechanism that, like, they're using, but, like, we had that, right? Like, that's why I'm, like, still not over, like, the Chuck Schumer cave. We had the only places we had real pressure, and we just gave it up for no reason. We need to be playing hardball in a way that I think some of these people are deeply uncomfortable. And I mean, you even hear people that are like on the Dem side condemning this. And I'm like, it's not a hypothetical anymore.
It's like, okay, Merrick Garland, you had your chance.
Don't even get me started.
Saw that tweet about weak men who fumbled in critical moments. Merrick Garland, but...
And Joe Alwyn, Taylor Swift.
Oh my God, on that note.
But like the Texas stuff is really important. I think it also, people are paying attention. And that's one of the things that we haven't really talked about much, but has been one of the things, like, the attention economy is very real.
Yes, especially in
And
social media.
I wish we were as annoying in our digital communication as we are in our fundraising communication, because, like, so much of what even is good that the Democrats do is completely unheard. And it's not easy to celebrate your wins, but it's impossible if you don't have a media organization, if you don't have comms strategy to reach people where they're actually at. And newspapers aren't there anymore.
Yeah, and that is exactly what we are trying to build here at New Digital Now. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us and answer some of our supporter questions and talk a little bit about the future of the Democratic Party, because we really need all the ideas we can get.
Thanks for having me on. If you think that I'm worth listening to, organize memes on all platforms. Don't use Hustle. It's owned by Trump people, and fight the power.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Let's do this. Thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing from you in our focus group and seeing you next time.